Hi everyone, I'm Jack and today I'm here for the student room to talk about what I included in my personal statement for French and Spanish. I thought that if I went through what I included in mine, I could talk from experience and then hopefully you will learn something from that. This video is probably most useful for those studying a similar subject, so an art subject. Obviously I do languages. For things like English literature and history as well, it may also be something that you will want to listen to, but if you're studying sciences or something like that, I don't know much about them, and unfortunately I won't really be able to give much advice that is relevant. So the first thing in my personal statement that I did was an introduction, and this was by far the hardest part because I remember sitting there for like 2 or 3 hours wondering how to even start it. What should the first word be? And in the end I decided to write the introduction last. I came back to it after writing the main bit of the personal statement because I was just so unsure of what to talk about. In the end I decided to kind of start with a way of sharing my passion for languages and just kind of summarising why I enjoy languages. I actually have my personal statement here which I printed off. I'm not going to read everything from it, but I basically said that during my first holiday abroad I was intrigued by foreign languages. I had a desire to break down language barriers and talk to people in their native language. I was unsurprisingly keen to begin learning French and Spanish in secondary school, and since I started I have not only developed an excellent understanding of grammar, but also an appreciation of two unique cultures. I decided that I wanted to start my personal statement by starting at the very start of my language learning journey, I guess, by talking about how I became interested in languages and how my interest has developed over time. In my introduction I also said that I wanted to be either a teacher or a translator. I don't think it's absolutely necessary to say what job you want to do, but because I had some sort of an idea, I felt like it gave me a bit of sense of direction and a bit more purpose, so that's why I included that, but you don't have to, I don't think. The next 2 paragraphs were quite specific to what I was studying in terms of the languages and the courses that I applied for. All of the 5 courses that I applied for had a literature element to them, so I felt like I wanted to talk a little bit about the foreign literature that I had read, just to kind of show my passion and show that I am appropriate for the course. It's definitely important to try and tailor your personal statement to what the course covers. So I said that I'm an avid reader, which I am. You can see I have a bookshelf behind me with lots of books. And I talked about one of the Spanish books I read, which was the first one I read. It was called La Sombra del Viento by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. And it's actually my favourite book. It's about the Spanish Civil War and about the power of books and literature. It's an amazing book. If you haven't read it, you definitely should. But anyway, I talked about that and how it kind of introduced me to Spanish history throughout the 20th century. So it taught me a lot about Spain that I didn't already know about the Spanish Civil War and things like that. I also mentioned that I'd read 2 of Carlos Ruiz Zafón's other books, El Juego del Ángel and El Prisionero del Cielo, which are in English The Angel's Game and The Prisoner of Heaven. La Sombra del Viento, by the way, is called The Shadow of the Wind. For me, that was a way to show that I was really interested in Spanish literature, particularly contemporary Spanish literature. It also showed that I was interested in Spanish history because it was a book about Spanish history. Then I talked about some of the French literature that I'd read, and one of the plays that I talked about was Le Misanthrope by Molière. This is a 17th century French tragedy, and since starting university this is no longer my interest in terms of French studies, but at the time I was really passionate about plays and I thought that I would love studying them at university, so I included it in my personal statement and I talked about kind of what it had taught me about French society at the time with the nobility and aristocracy and things. And then I also mentioned that I'd read another play by Molière called Les Femmes Savantes. This is a play that I actually managed to see at a theatre with my A-level French class. We weren't studying the play, but it was on in my town and we went to see it, so I thought if I talked about that it would also show that I was interested not only in reading plays but also watching them being performed. I made it really clear throughout both of them 2 paragraphs that all of the literature that I was talking about in my statement I had read independently of my school studies. There's nothing stopping you from talking about books that you've studied as part of your A-level courses, but I think it's perhaps a little bit more impressive, a bit more unique to talk about books that you've gone out of your own way to read independently. It definitely shows that you're genuinely passionate about your subject and interested in the content of it. Also, if you mention books in your personal statement, please make sure that you have read them, because if you've not read them, how do you know what they have taught you? How do you know what they're really about? It is a waste of your time to talk about books that you've not even read. And if you go to a university where you have an interview like Oxford or Cambridge or something, they're probably going to ask you about the books in your interview. The next paragraph was quite short, and it was just about my interest in current affairs in French and Spanish speaking countries. So I talked about how I listened to the news online and kind of kept up to date with what was happening in 21st century society. And then I also mentioned a little bit about foreign films. Not all of the courses I applied to actually had foreign films as part of the course, but quite a few of them did, so I felt like it was relevant to mention in a little bit of detail. So I talked about Le Choriste, which is an amazing French film, and also Los Diarios de Motocicleta, which is a Latin American film which taught me about Latin America as opposed to Spain. After talking about kind of the texts, the literature and film that I was interested in my subject, I then talked a little bit about my academic life as a whole. So I talked about how I received an award for languages for getting a high grade with my GCSEs, and how that reflected my strong work ethic and constant desire to improve. At A-level I also studied English literature and English language, so I made it very clear why and how those subjects were relevant to the languages degree I wanted to do. I talked about with literature how I gained a lot of terminology and how to analyse books. In terms of English language, I talked about how I had learned about grammar in English and how that would impact my understanding of grammar in French and Spanish. I also mentioned at the end of my personal statement some volunteering that I'd done, and I don't think it's absolutely necessary to talk about volunteering if it's not relevant. If you've done something but it's not relevant to your degree or course, it's not really going to say much about you in terms of a student of languages, for example. So I talked about volunteering because I'd volunteered in some languages classes at my school. The final thing that I did was include a conclusion, and it's really important that you have a conclusion because it's kind of the last thing that the admissions tutors read, and you want to end on a high so that you can impress them. I don't really know if I like mine. It sounds very forced. It sounds a bit fake actually, so I don't know if this is a model example, but I'm just going to read what I've said anyway, and it is: I would love the opportunity to be taught by expert linguists and relish the thought of deepening my knowledge of these two languages and cultures. I eagerly await the many opportunities that I will be faced with as an undergraduate. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it ends and it wraps everything up, so I felt like it was kind of appropriate when I was writing. So that is everything that I included in my personal statement. I hope this video helped some of you and you kind of got some ideas about what things to talk about and how to talk about them. Obviously not every personal statement is the same, it's personal, so it's very individual to you. There's no one set way to write a personal statement, there's no formulas for success, but I think that the things I included were quite useful and they allowed me to get the offers for the universities that I did. If you've got any more questions about writing personal statements or applying to university, please let me know in the comments below and I will make a video about that in the future. But until next time, thanks for watching and see you all again later.